You are listening to Ruthie's Table 4 in partnership with Moncler.
The last time I saw Alison Loehnis, I had just arrived in New York. It was November, right before the election. Walking down Madison Avenue, I heard, "Ruthie, you're here." It was Alison. She immediately whisked me into her best friend's jewelry store, Sydney Garber, told me in detail about the Peter Doig show at Gagosian Gallery, and took me for a coffee at our favorite, St. Ambrose. Just like that, I was swept immediately back into the best of New York City. Alison and I have much in common. We're two American women living abroad. We both adore the small seaside towns of Liguria, and we share a favorite bookstore, Heywood Hill in Mayfair. Alison grew up in Manhattan with a mother who was a passionate cook, and she discovered the joy of food and fashion early on, licking brownie spoons next to her mom and elegantly accessorizing her school uniform. She channeled this ambition into a dynamic career spanning Saatchi Saatchi, Disney, LVMH, and now Net-A-Porter, where she is the CEO. Today, Alison and I are here at Table 4 to talk about food and fashion, leadership and womanhood, balancing work and family, and of course, we're going to plan our next trip to New York City. What could be better? So here we are. It's so good to see you. This has been on the cards for a while, hasn't it?
So excited.
With your schedule, my schedule.
I know. I'm so
up
happy
and
to
down,
be here.
But here we are. I'm not going to let you go.
I'm not going to leave, so that's
no,
great.
we're not going to go. Where have you been most recently?
So I just got back from New York, and prior to that, I was in Providence, Rhode Island.
I can guess why.
Visiting my alma mater with the next generation.
Yeah,
With my son,
And good,
who's going to be starting in the fall semester. So they had an open day, so we just did that.
And did you feel very connected to Brown?
Very. I mean, saying that,
People
I hadn't.
went there too, I think.
Yeah, I felt just a really, the first time I stepped foot back on campus after the last time I was there, I started crying. Joyful tears.
How much time was it for you?
It had been probably 10 years or so. Yeah. Not since I graduated, sadly, but since I had last been. And actually, this is actually very relevant to our discussion today, because Brown for me has many, many memories, but also quite a few food memories.
I was going to ask you. Yeah, tell me what they are.
Well, because Providence is such an interesting place. It was settled by there were lots of Portuguese, lots of Italian Americans, and then of course there's Johnson and Wales, which is incredibly famous, has turned out lots of chefs. So the restaurant scene, at least in my during my time, was always very vibrant, very sort of ahead of its time. And there was one restaurant, which you will know in particular, which everyone begged to be taken to by your parents or your friends' parents, called Al Forno.
I know.
And
I remember Al Forno. I've never been there, but I remember when they opened.
It was a thing.
I think it might have been around the time that we opened the River Cafe. I think they might have been there maybe early 90s.
Yes, exactly.
And they had a wood oven, right? And made pizzas.
Wood oven, and they were known for pizzas, and it was the kind of thing that you dreamed about. And I hadn't been for years, and so I thought, you know what, let me take my son. And I went both with excitement and a bit of trepidation, because sometimes your memory doesn't. Anyway, it was as good as ever.
Is it a husband and wife too? Do you remember?
I don't
have a feeling it might have been. I just remember the parallel, or whether I read about it when we put our wood oven in, or when Rose and I started this. And it was funny because, as you say, Providence is not, you think, as a kind of food mecca of the United States. But that restaurant really made an impact. And I remember it really well.
Yeah.
Funny. Did you eat out a lot when you were at college?
Oh, God, no. I mean, no. Only when you could get someone's
to take you.
Generous parents to take you. And then we would go to some, really gross place, which was cheap, and you could bring your own wine. Basically, so no.
Did you kind of cook when you were there? Did friends of
Yeah,
yours?
I mean, we thought we would do dinners at our house. Once we moved off campus, I think after my sophomore year, I moved off campus.
An apartment, yeah.
And so we cooked, and then we would take turns as housemates. And I mean, I remember thinking I was terribly sophisticated because I made couscous, which was probably
pretty sophisticated,
totally flavorless and gross. And then I remember having a guy over for a date and being, having no time whatsoever, and you'll be outraged, buying Newman's Own tomato sauce.
Oh yeah, okay.
And
Paul Newman.
Yes,
good,
and pretending I made it.
Oh yeah, fine, that's fine. But a lot of people can remember doing these podcasts, the meal they cooked for somebody they wanted to sort of impress in a date. And there's that great, do you ever see the Epcraft's File? One of the great scenes in this movie is Michael Caine cooking a meal as an act of seduction. You know?
This definitely was not that, as evidenced by the jar.
But you know Tobias Meyer?
Yeah.
He told me the story that he invited, who is his husband now, to dinner at a restaurant, because he thought that's what you do on the first date. But he thought they'd have him for a drink, and then he'd go out for dinner. But just in case he thought it went really well, the drink, he had a whole meal prepared.
Oh,
in
amazing.
case, and they stayed home and had the meal, and they're married.
Amazing.
So there you go. So we have a little drill here, which is to read a recipe. And you chose the banya chowder.
Yes.
You also brought in a recipe for meatloaf. So we can read the recipe for the banya chowder, but I definitely want to discuss the meatloaf. Because it's interesting. Ed Richet brought in a recipe for his chili, and with his chefs, with Eric Ripert, he read a recipe from his book, and so did Wolfgang. We had a recipe of his. So I like the idea that you brought in your meatloaf recipe. So we'll go through that. Do you want to tell me about that first?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was just basically thinking about early memories of food, and I just remember my mom making this meatloaf, which is, by the way, super dated, and you know the ingredients. And everything. I think it came out of like a '60s cookbook.
Yeah.
And you know, there's ketchup, there's all kinds of things in it. Yeah. But it's just one of those things I remember. I remember asking her years ago and saying, "Can you just unearth that recipe for me?" It was just the one thing I remember. Yeah. But the banya chowder.
Here it is. This is the meatball. Let's talk about the meatloaf recipe for 1 minute. Barbecue style with Hunt's tomato sauce, 1960s. Yeah, there you go. Beef, breadcrumbs. See, I'm reading it out. I can read it out. An egg, salt, seasoning, Hunt's tomato sauce. Do you know what that was? 2 cans. It's probably good. Did you know it?
I'm sure it's not good. I think it's sweet, and I don't think it's good. But
okay. Do you think it still exists?
In America, yeah, for sure.
Probably. And then water, vinegar, brown sugar, so it's a little sweet, mustard and Worcestershire. You put it all. It sounds delicious. Have you made it? Do you make it now?
Years ago I made it, and it's not anything I actually want to make or necessarily eat, but it just brought memory. I just have this memory of it sitting in a tin, a baking tin, and having it. And sometimes it was good, sometimes it was a little bit dry. And funnily enough, when I found it, I showed it to this young woman who works with me. She goes, "Oh yeah, my mom used to make that too."
Yeah, my mother made meatloaf.
So it's oven era.
I don't know if it's an English thing. It's not very English.
No, I tried to explain it to my husband, and he didn't
quite get it.
And I think he found the recipe revolting.
Yeah. No, I think it sounds good. Let's have it. It makes me hungry. But you could read. So you chose the recipe for banya chowder, which is really a great thing to eat. So tell me why you chose it, of all the recipes and all the River Cafe books.
First of all, it's very hard to choose. I think in the case of banya chowder, one, I'm a savory person. I love anchovies. And it's got a real umami-ness to it, I feel like, the banya chowder sauce. Interestingly, we've never had it in Italy. We've only ever had it either here or at home.
Have you ever been to the north of Italy?
Yes.
Because that's where it comes from, like the mountainous region of Piemonte.
And it's so, it's been a tradition in our house for years where we always used to have it. My husband's a phenomenal cook, and we always used to have it on New Year's Day.
Oh, nice thing to eat.
And it would be one of those things where you'd kind of wake up a little bit tired.
Yeah.
and it was just, it sort of hit all the spots that you needed it to. So we would always have banya chowder, and that was our thing. And so we do it with cooked vegetables in winter months, but we also do it with fresh crudité in the summertime.
Oh, so you dip it. Yeah.
And use it as a dip as opposed to a dressing. I mean, I could drink it. I love it.
Yeah, I love it too. I love the as you say, the saltiness, and then as you say, the seasonality of it. We in the winter. Well, the recipe that you have, we kind of. I think it had carrots, it had chard, and it had fennel, and it had something else. An artichoke. It's really nice with an artichoke because visually to see a whole artichoke. We're just discussing salt. Actually, we're discussing.
Fernando.
There we go. Thank you. What is it?
So this is a Timorasto copy. From Piemonte, not Piemonte, so Castellania. No oak.
It is from Piemonte.
No, this one, yes.
Oh.
So the savoriness that you're going to get on this wine is going to be more on the kind of fruit, lemony kind of notes.
Oh, so it's salty.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Fernando.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.
Can you try it?
Okay, so banya chowder with Prosecco. It serves 6 people. You will need 760 ml of Prosecco, 3 garlic cloves peeled, 300 grams of Swiss chard, 2 fennel bulbs cut into 6 wedges, 3 celery hearts quartered, 12 salted anchovies cleaned and filleted, 250 grams of unsalted butter, and 50 ml of olive oil. Yum. You put the Prosecco into a saucepan, add the garlic, and boil it until the Prosecco has reduced and the garlic is soft. Remove from the heat. Blanch the Swiss chard, remove, and then boil fennel and celery until soft. Drain. Return the saucepan with the reduced Prosecco and softened garlic to the heat and add the anchovy fillets. Allow them to melt into the mixture. Gently whisk in the softened butter, remove the pan from the heat after the first addition of butter. When all the butter has been incorporated, add the olive oil and black pepper. Arrange the warm vegetables on a serving plate, pour over the sauce, and serve immediately.
Yum.
Yum.
Yum. So you're saying that Al is a really good cook.
Al's a very good cook.
Tell me about his cooking.
So he is the second of 3 boys. And growing up, they spent a lot of time in Wales. And my father-in-law was away a lot for work. And so my mother-in-law very wisely thought, oh, wait, I'm spending this time in Wales. I'm at the top of this hill. The weather's horrendous. And I've got these 3 boys. I'm going to teach them to cook, or I'm going to become a short order cook. So lo and behold, you have these 3 men who became great cooks. And my husband trained actually as a chef. So he always worked in restaurants and things during his gap year. And right after, I think it was just finishing university, he was trained by the Roux brothers.
Yeah.
And he has this just incredible, I think, curiosity, but also imagination and creativity. I mean, he can open a cupboard and see all these disparate ingredients and see a dish. And I always laugh because to me, I just see disparate ingredients. So I think my fashion corollary is I can up a closet and I can see lots of different ways of wearing things. But I do not have his skills in the kitchen.
And so tell me about life in your household. But we're going to go to your childhood. But right now, how does a day work in terms of feeding your 2 children, eating together? What is it like?
We eat together as much as possible. I feel like I've been in children's exam mode for years, it feels like. And when they're into exams, they want to eat early. So we'll have something prepared for them. They'll eat super early. But otherwise, it's all of us around the table.
Does he shop and cook? Is that his?
We shop together. So a lot of it happens online, or we'll pick up stuff like for produce and stuff locally.
Is that fun?
So, yes. And we divide and conquer on that front.
In what way?
Well, just in, like, there's certain random things I always want to have in the house. Like, I'm obsessed with kohlrabi, which is super strange. But there's only a few places where you can find, so I'll go and run and grab that. If he's passing Natura, he'll go and run and grab that kind of thing. So we do the shopping together. And if it's, one of us will go to the butcher, one will go to the fishmonger, that kind of thing. And then during the week, he's really the cook. I mean, I describe it as having hung up my not terribly slick apron a number of years ago, which doesn't mean that I don't do anything. I'll help on prep. I do front of house. I'm great at clear up. And if it's, left to my own devices, I'll do it. But for him, he's such a facile cook. And it's not always sort of fancy and elaborate, but it's just...
And it makes him happy, probably. He enjoy it.
He really does.
You should have had him. He should have come here today. We got to talk to him about. No, but it is. Men are cooking. Men cook, and there are women I know who never go in their kitchen or know how to cook, and it's fine. Whatever. The pressure is off. And who. Don't you think?
I do. I mean, I enjoy it, but for me, it's more labored. It's sort of like. If we were students, I'm the student that had to study. Let's say I was the equivalent of someone who had to study hard to get a good mark, whereas he could kind of wing in on the cooking front. And I still enjoy it, but I don't I have to be quite studied about it. And I just like seeing his imagination at play. I mean, we'll go away somewhere far away. So, for example, we were in Thailand and ate something delicious, and then we'll get back to London, and he'll say, "I think I'm going to make that green curry," and sort of goes to the Thai supermarket, doesn't have a recipe, and somehow it comes together.
Yeah,
that's not me.
People often ask me when food in Britain got better, and I often think it's when airline flights got cheaper, and people actually traveled.
Yeah.
You remember when Freddie Laker and all those people started that you could fly to Florence or Vienna for £15, and I think everybody went. And if you eat good food or you eat food from other cultures and you want to eat it again, you kind of learn to cook it, or you look for the ingredients. I mean, it's one of the factors, I think.
Yeah.
That and Jamie Oliver getting men to cook, and the whole nature of it, cooking is fun.
And men cooking was super,
it's kind of sexy, isn't it?
Yeah, and it was really foreign to me because my dad was not a cook.
So tell me about. So now we can go. Tell me about growing up in the Loehnis household in Manhattan. First of all, it's really glam that Olivia's Manhattan, but that you both, that you grew up in Manhattan as a child. Tell me what that was like.
So I grew up in Manhattan, and it's so funny because anytime, I would meet people who weren't from Manhattan, they'd be like, what was it like? Did you live in one of those buildings? I'd say, yes. And they'd say, well, what was that like? And I was like, well, I don't know. I didn't know anything else. I was in a building. So yes, grew up in Manhattan with my parents and my younger sister. Both of my parents worked, although saying that, my mom had been a teacher. And when she had me, she stopped working. And then she had my sister, and she was looking after us. And I remember it was one summer, and she was out in Long Island, and we were at camp or doing something, and she was just super bored. And she ran into a guy she'd gone to high school with who said, hey, I've just started this advertising agency. Do you want to come and do some work? And lo and behold, she did, and she's, launched this incredible career in advertising. She was a really great cook. Our experience sort of with food, during the week, my sister and I would always eat earlier than our parents because they always had sort of more of a European schedule, and we were kids that wanted to eat at like 6 on the dot, at the latest. But at the weekends, we always had dinners together. So during the week, we had a babysitter, sort of housekeeper, prepare dinner, and the weekends was always my mom. And I remember sort of her being pretty sophisticated in a few ways. One, I think in the recipes that she chose. My parents loved to travel, and they would come back and share with us, their experiences, bring us little treats. And also, I'll never forget, they went to Morocco, and they came back and they said that they'd eaten pigeon pie.
Pastilla. I came back from Morocco 2 days ago.
Oh, well. But I remember as a kid living in New York in the building, I was like, ugh. And I was like, that sounds absolutely horrible. Anyway, but so they used to travel. So I think their exposure. My mom always loved France, and she would experiment with all these different things. And they used to have these dinner parties.
I was going to ask you about entertaining. Did they?
I remember like some of my earliest memories of my mom cooking. It was probably even before she went back to work.
Would that be
That's
70s.
70s. And my mom, I remember they'd have these dinner parties, and she'd make all these super, what I thought were elegant starters, or little sort of, what do you call it?
Canapes.
Yes, canapes. And so there was one that she used to make that was almost like a little spinach souffle, and she did it in like a muffin tin. And then there were always these dips and lots of crudité. And then she used to make something which was like a pita bread with paprika. Anyway, I just remember it all being, hearing clinking glasses and thinking it was all...
Were you sort of sitting on the steps or sitting in the... Sort
in
of
my
around
room.
Your pajamas?
Exactly. Coming in asking for like a salted nut. Yes, exactly. And begging for stuff.
Did she have help? Would she have people to serve?
I don't think, no. I remember once, if she did a big party, but by and large, it was just her doing it. Yeah. And so at the weekends, she would do the cooking again when she went back to work.
Yeah.
And I remember we went to Long Island every weekend, and I remember having lots of sort of seasonal and locally sourced stuff. I remember bay scallops and corn when it came into season, and when the tomatoes came into season, and just those being really sort of hallmarks of end of school and summer. And just having, the other thing is my parents got curious about quote unquote health food really early on. So I'll never forget, we used to have whole wheat pancakes. And they would and they would never buy white bread. All I wanted in life was white bread, and I would have these brown bread. I remember listening to one of your previous guests talking about brown bread sandwiches. We always had precisely. So we had we would have like brown bread, and I'll never forget having a sleepover at my friend's house, and we were going to summer camp together the next day, and so her mom made me lunch. And I came home and I was like, Mom, I just had the best lunch ever.
What was it?
She's like, what'd you have? I said I had a bologna sandwich with white bread, and then I had like Twinkies. And I, like, you know, kids, and my mom being totally horrified.
Yeah.
I mean, we were allowed treats. We were allowed a little, you know, but so it's not like we couldn't have sugar or anything like that. But I just remember thinking all white bread and bologna was really where it's at.
My son went to the American school, and you know, we always had a fridge that just had the right amount of food. I don't keep a lot of food in the fridge, as you say, kind of healthy food, and you know, not too extreme. But we had a lot of salted anchovies, and as you say, mozzarella, prosciutto, tomatoes. And he called me. Went to visit a friend of his from the American school's house, and he called me up from the house and he said, Mom, could you just come pick me up today? And I went, but it's really close. You want me to come over? He said, yeah, because I'd really like to show you what a good mother's fridge looks like. I said, I think you could walk home. And I went back, but I did go and see it. Of course, it's one of those double fridges.
Yeah, an American fridge.
Packed with every possible thing, you know, good mother's fridge, you know.
That's
so
hilarious.
You go. I've been in Britain too long. But, so Carrie, so the health food.
The health food thing.
Seasonality, I'm also interested in what you were saying about, because I find that when I'm in the United States now, is that there's a supermarket stuff where you can have anything, any time of year. Not that I'm against supermarkets, because I think that there's a really great role to play for supermarkets in this world. But I think that when you go to those farm shops in Long Island, my kids were always stayed in the North Fork, or friends of mine, you know, on the other side. But those farm shops have corn in the autumn, and then they run out of corn. They have tomatoes in the summer, and then they run out of tomatoes.
Yeah.
And they have, you know, that there really is a sense of the seasonality, and also farm to table, that they just grow so much arugula, and then there's none left.
Yep.
There's an abundance, but it's carefully, consciously chosen. Do you think?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's sort of two worlds living in tandem. But I remember that from that period, and of course at the same time you're drinking frozen orange juice, right?
Yeah.
So it was a bit frozen veg. I was talking to my
Yeah.
husband. I was like, "Did you guys have frozen vegetables here?" He said, "All the time." I was like, "So do we." But anyway, aside from, at least at weekends, I remember corn and that corn season, the tomato season, strawberries.
Strawberries,
blueberries, and there's a place actually.
Blueberries. You see blueberries.
Yeah, there's a place that still exists. I don't know what they have now, but in Watermill, called the Milk Pail, and it was this apple orchard. And so I remember as soon as it was, you know, time for the harvest, we would go and get apples, and then they made apple cider donuts, which were like heaven. So yes, there was an absolute seasonality there, and the seafood shop, which is still thriving today in Wainscott, Long Island. You know, it's whatever came in.
Yeah. So
that was super
and when you
exciting.
mentioned the little scallops, I love those.
The bay scallops.
Those I really don't think you get anywhere. Certainly not in Europe.
No. My mom made them with vermouth.
Did she? What did she? How did she make them?
I don't really remember. I just remember there being vermouth, and as a kid thinking it was something. There was vermouth. There was also a little bit of white wine, and I remember thinking that was super cheeky because I was having booze.
Alcohol.
Yeah.
So you varied. So you went from Manhattan to country.
Yeah.
You had this life. And your mother worked, and your father. What did your dad do?
So my dad worked in the fragrance business.
Oh, what's that?
Yeah, so he worked in sort of the perfume business. So where he ran, when I was really, really little, he ran the Saint Laurent fragrance and beauty business in the U.S.
Okay.
And I remember seeing these photos of him being in Paris, and like I don't know why they needed him on a shoot, but like him on location and seeing this incredibly beautiful model, and they were shooting the ad campaign for this very famous perfume called Rive Gauche, which is I think still available.
I remember that bottle.
The blue.
Yeah, the blue bottle.
Yeah. And then he remained in the beauty business. And so I think it's funny. I think, somehow I didn't think of myself as following my parents from a career standpoint, but obviously their interest in business resonated in some way. And while my mom was the sort of key to food, if you will, I also experienced food through my dad in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
One, my dad has always been, he would pretend to cook. I mean, the dishes that he made for us, he made a good milkshake.
That's good.
And then he had one dish, which he will be.
Olivia knows that.
It was actually, speaking of local produce, he made peach milkshakes. So he would get the local peaches with ice cream and like run them through the thing, which was delicious. And then his specialty, which I tease him about to this day, which he tried to con my sister and I into thinking was a good thing, was teriyaki eggs.
What's that?
Exactly. It's scrambled eggs with teriyaki sauce drizzled on it, which is repulsive. So
Is
you
it?
don't need
Oh,
to
okay,
have
we
it.
won't.
Anyway,
We
but
won't
he
talk-
always
we'll
loved
just talk about the good things.
He loved
did.
to eat.
Yeah.
And so what he would do is he had this file in his office of, tears from newspapers and magazines of restaurants he wanted to go to. And that informed a lot of the travel he and my mom would do. So they'd go to the middle of nowhere in Italy because he had seen this place. But then also he introduced me to Japanese food. Because my school finished early on a Friday. And so every Friday I would go after school and meet him in his office. And he was really into art, as was I. So we would go to a museum. So let's say we'd go to the Met or we'd go to MoMA. And then he'd take me out to lunch, either before or after. And I'll never forget, one day he was like, I'm going to have you try sushi. And I was like, what's sushi? And
How old were you?
Gosh, probably like 11 or so. And there's this whole world opened up. So I remember, for my dad, has always been around sort of curiosity, and he was a very willing consumer of food. He's a big eater,
so cool.
but not a cook.
And so you went to restaurants in New York was part of your. Would you go out? Well, that routine, which is very touching. My father used to take me when I was a child. We lived in the country, 2 hours north of Woodstock of New York, and our thing was not every week, but to go. He'd take me in the car to New York. We'd go past the big ships. This is probably in the late 50s, early 60s, the big boats, and see the SS France and the Queen Elizabeth. Then we would go to have lunch. You'd take me to the Russian tea room. That was a great place. And then we would go see a musical. And so we would always go see a musical of the day, which were, West Side Story or My Fair Lady. And then we would go to Sam Goody's, the record store.
Oh, my God, yes.
And buy the record. And then go back up and then just play the record, which means that I can remember every show tune from, every musical.
Hence the matchmaker singing.
Yeah, matchmaker. Yeah, exactly. And I think those rituals with your dad, have you done any of that with your children? Like,
yes, absolutely.
What is yours?
Absolutely. We would do the same thing, sort of, a museum. I think they're less willing attendees.
Yeah.
But museum and then food.
Yeah.
It was that museum food, or like a nice long walk and food.
Yeah.
There's sort of always that
Yeah.
at the end. But I just remember, that it was just this incredible time, and actually all these interests sort of were piqued off the back of that. An interest in art history, an interest in food. This idea also that you don't have to spend 10 hours in a gallery to make it interesting. You can, and that's something I actually learned with my children. Sometimes a little bit less is. A little bit less is more.
So you had this kind of culture of food, but also that you grew up with a mother who was, a passionate cook and entertained and saw food as sharing and friends and all that. And then your father who did this beautiful time with you to eat out. And then even at Brown, people would visit and you talk about Brown as food and the name of the restaurant you went to. And then when you then went out to the outside world, when you left Brown, did you have your own apartment? Did you?
Yeah, so I lived at home for a couple of years, and then I had my own place.
What you were working? What were you doing?
So I was working, so my first job was in advertising.
In advertising?
Yeah.
At your mom's place or no?
No. I worked at, I worked at Saatchi and Saatchi. I think it was like a Manhattan thing. So you're at college, you can't really afford to go out to eat much, and if you do, it's like a really easy local place. You then get your first job, and I was not making much money at all, yet somehow nobody cooked. And I think partly because, you lived in these tiny apartments which barely had a kitchen, but you could cook in those kitchens, but no one cooked. So it was basically takeout.
This is at Saatchi and Saatchi.
Yeah, it was like, actually then I was still living at home for at least the first part of it, and then I moved into my tiny little apartment, and I did takeout the whole time. I didn't have enough money to get my shirt dry cleaned, so I don't know how I was doing takeout.
My son went to Columbia and claimed that it was cheaper to eat out than cook at home. I never got the economics of that. But
No. A friend of mine, I remember used to keep sweaters in his oven. Because he didn't, and I'll never forget, he was very chic. He worked for Ralph Lauren, and then he worked for Armani, and he had great taste. And I remember going to his apartment, I was like, this is super. And he's like, he was from the South, and he's like, honey, I'm like, show me, that's such a nice, what's going on in the oven? Honey, I keep my sweaters in the oven.
Victoria Beckham's first line in her podcast with me was, Ruthie, do you know what my mom kept in her oven? And I went, I don't know what. She said, filing cabinet.
Okay.
How she used her oven, filing cabinet.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. So it's a
There you go.
variation on a theme.
Yeah.
However, the spirit did move me to start cooking a bit when I was on my own. And I love the movies. I've always loved the movies. And to me, the Oscars were like watching the Academy Awards on TV. Couldn't be more exciting. I mean, I felt like every year I was up for an award. That's how excited I got.
So what year
And
are
I
we
would
in
have-
now? We're in
So we're in the 90s. We're
Yeah.
in like early mid 90s.
Okay.
And I would have friends over, and I would have these Oscar parties.
How?
And it was so
Late
fun.
at night. Oh, no, I guess it wouldn't be late
No,
at night.
it was
Here
civilized.
always late
It started
night.
at like,
Yeah.
7, I think, because
Yeah.
on the West Coast it's really early.
Okay.
And I remember, and I would go and I'd make, I can't remember,
What
I
did
think
you
I remember doing like some chicken breast. My mom had this like Dijon chicken breast marinade thing. I remember doing that and making what I used to use a lot was the Barefoot Contessa cookbook.
The what?
The Barefoot Contessa
Oh, yeah, of
cookbook.
course,
And I remember
of
making
course.
the kind of
Oh my God,
couscous.
yeah.
It was like a couscous salad, or making orzos or various pilafs and things. So I remember cooking at that moment in time. And then when I really started cooking more, actually, is when I moved to London. And I'll never forget, I moved here. It was during the May bank holiday weekend of 2001, so just before 9/11. And I was really excited about coming. I was coming for a short stint for a job. I was allowed to come and work out of our London office for 6 months. Moved into this corporate flat, and I realized that the weekend I was going to arrive was a bank holiday and that maybe people wouldn't be around, so I might be all on my own. And I remember thinking, gosh, I'm going to be so lonely here. What am I going to do? And I thought, I did 2 things. One, I wrote in a little notebook the name of everyone I knew in London, just so I could remind myself that I wasn't alone, even if they weren't in
Good
town.
idea. Yeah.
And then the second thing was, I'm just going to cook.
Yeah.
And I remember going to the grocery store and going to Waitrose, which was like a revelation because it was so much nicer than any grocery store I'd ever seen in New York. And of course, when I moved here, I don't think London was even, was not nearly where it is now in terms of its reputation, in terms of food. And I remember all these Americans would be like, oh my God, you're not going to be able to eat anything. And by the way, they don't refrigerate their eggs.
That's right. That was the maid's. I remember that.
And I was like, I think it's going to be okay. I think
eggs in the supermarket. Yeah, that's right. And
They don't refrigerate.
and they don't use
And guess
napkins.
what?
Do you remember how
Oh my
people
gosh.
don't use napkins?
Wait, thank you. Please.
Sorry about this, guys.
No,
They
can
don't.
you please? Okay, Ruthie.
don't.
Thank you. I've said this to so many people over the years. The number of dinners I've been to by delicious, yummy, cozy dinners at home,
napkins.
seasoned hosts, and I would sit there and I'd reach for the thing to put on my, and there were no napkins.
napkins. I
Okay,
know, I
so
don't
I'm
know.
not a weirdo. Okay, that makes me feel so much better.
No, the no napkin thing was like, shocking. I think it's changed now.
Well, it seems to. That's hilarious.
Yeah, I can't say, even if I have like a piece of bread, I always have to have
Of course.
a napkin. Do you? Yeah.
Yes, I mean, even if I'm meeting someone for a drink and there's a napkin on the table, the napkin goes
we
down.
love napkins. We go on for hours about napkins. Yeah.
Does anyone ever ask you here for a black napkin?
Oh, no.
So I discovered this in New York. It's such a New York thing. I was having dinner with a friend who's wearing black, and your napkins actually don't shed. But there's a
Oh.
number, some of those really linen-y napkins, you're wearing
Oh.
black. And a friend of mine called the waiter over and said, hi, may I please have a black napkin?
Oh, wow.
And I was like, what's a black
Wow.
napkin? And she goes, they have black napkins so they don't get on your stuff.
Wow. When a friend of mine worked at Soho House in New York, one of our chefs went to open Soho House in L.A. He said that there were people who would only eat off, that they had square plates. I think it was fashionable at the time. And he said there were clients who just would only eat on a round plate, So there you go. You can only have a black napkin or a round plate.
Anyway, sorry, I digress on- I
So
digress on.
so you're Oscar Prize, so you're cooking.
So I'd have these Oscar,
you're-
and that's when I was.
Oh no,
and then,
coming over
yes,
here.
and then I
nowhere
came
in
over
London,
here, and I would
and
cook,
you started,
and it wasn't anything particularly elaborate. It was just that I didn't do takeout because also it wasn't a thing here.
didn't do takeout.
At all,
Yeah.
and that was really helpful. So I
Yeah.
would go and I'd buy, and it's funny because I love trying different foods and different dishes, But however, I'm very happy. Once I like something, I'm happy
Make
to
it
stick
again.
with it for a long period of time. And my friends have always made fun of me. I mean, I would literally, I remember in New York, there's this one place we used to go and I used to order the same thing. And I probably ordered the same thing for 2 years, and then I'm done.
So you know what the equivalent of that is?
Wearing the same clothes every day.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, when there was a period when my husband was very sick and there were all these things that were going on, I realized that I could just wear the same denim skirt every single day. As a matter of fact, the denim skirt was stolen not long ago.
Oh, no.
In my suitcase, which they put out on the street, and the person forgot to put it in the boot. So the suitcase was stolen. I came back and told Charles, our manager, I said, and then the suitcase was stolen and my denim skirt was in it. He said, well, every cloud has a silver lining.
But was there only one of the skirts? Or did you have a few denim skirts?
Yeah, but the choice, what I realized is that, decision, like you in a restaurant, that somehow just knowing that every day, I don't care, I just put on the denim skirt.
Uniform.
Whatever it is. So maybe there is, you probably would never ever think about wearing the same thing the way you chose the same
Yeah,
food.
that's true.
So you could eat. And I don't think I'd go to a restaurant and have the same. So there's
So
a fashion food thing. Yeah.
There's really a fashion food thing. I mean, I was thinking about it a lot in this sort of run up to today and just in general. And everyone has to eat. But
Everybody
there are
has to
people
get dressed.
But there are people that have very transactional relationships with food. They just look at it, they're like, I'm just going to eat, and it's fuel. I've never really understood that because to me, we are a household. We talk about what we're having for dinner before we've even had coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
And we will. And I remember once, I can't remember if it was my mother-in-law said something like didn't think that was great form. Or no, who was it? I can't remember. Saying, and I was like, but no, it doesn't, we're not taking away from the joy of now. So if I'm having breakfast, talking about dinner, I'm still enjoying breakfast. I'm thinking about dinner. My daughter has got this bug big time. I mean, if we know we're going on a trip, okay, she will research. She will know what she's having for breakfast 6 months in advance. That kind of thing around the planning. But it's
How
sort of
old is
similar.
she?
She's 16.
Yeah, there you go.
But it's similar to sort of to clothes in that everyone has to get dressed, and you can either just treat it as okay, I would need to cover my body to go out. But for me, in the same way, the food it's such a source of creativity
it is.
and joy.
Yeah.
And I've been asked a lot. Why do you love clothes? Why do you love fashion? I always assumed it's because my mom was really into fashion, and through osmosis, I saw the joy that it brought her. But I think also, I went to a school where we had a very strict uniform.
Tell me about that. What was the school?
It was called Chapin in New York, and I don't know, it's probably less strict now, but we had, for lower school, you had to wear either a yellow seersucker or green tunic, and in the winter months, there was this polyester version, and then you wore a white blouse, and you had to wear green or yellow socks and brown hard shoes. Later on, you could wear boat shoes and things. And then for the upper school, you had to wear a kilt, and you had to have a collar and specific colors, but it was quite, it was strict. And when we would have a field day, a sports day, I would lie in bed thinking oh my gosh, what am I going to wear? Not what am I going to wear to wow anyone, but just I get to choose. I get to choose. And I would drive my mom insane. Do you think I could wear? Anyway, and so I realized that to me, fashion is self-expression. It's freedom. And it's the same thing, being able to choose, to having the privilege of choose what you eat, where you eat it, putting things together, experimenting. It says the person who can eat the same thing every day.
No. But I think it is. I think that, as you say about, I have a granddaughter. I talk about it a lot. She's in New York, Ivy, and she said that she goes to bed at night and thinks, if I have lunch early, then I can have another lunch later.
Amazing.
And this is a girl who's skinny and totally on it, but she just thinks that way about food, and I think there is that, and the same fashion. When I said to a friend of mine, Jonah, I said, sometimes I make so many decisions during the day. I just think I'll just whatever. He said, you do not, because you do not do that. You're not being honest. You do think about it. And he said, and anyway, I can't. I'm your friend, and I can't imagine not worrying about or thinking about what I'm going to wear. It's the best thing. It's the same thing.
And it's choice. And it's just having that, the freedom to choose. And it's super, And actually, it's really funny. I was thinking, sorry, this is a bit of a tangent, but about choice. And there was this candy store out in Watermill called the Penny Candy Store that was around for years. It was the equivalent of a little newsagent here that sold candy. And weirdly, the store's been closed for years, but the sign is still up to this day. Yeah. And when we would have this tradition with my dad where he would take us to the Penny Candy Store and we each would have, I remember at first it was $1.
Yeah.
And then it was $2.
Yeah.
And you could choose what you wanted. And the people in the store were super strict. So literally, if you went over by a cent, you had to put something back. But I remember there was this thing around, I don't know what made me think of this just now, but there was this thing around choice. And I always knew exactly what I wanted from that penny candy thing. And I'd go with my sister, and she would take an hour. And the question was, do you want one big thing?
Yeah.
Do you want lots of little things? And how do you, sort of like your granddaughter, can I have 2 lunches?
Yeah.
How do I get the most out of this little
The thing is that it's also, as we are who we are as well, we're thinking about I certainly think about it in food, and I know you think about it in clothes, which is the other issues, the issues of food poverty, of the fact that there are people who don't have a choice because there are no, well, first of all, we know that in the Bronx, where, you know, you and I know very well that there are no vegetable shops, you know, and if you want to buy a carrot, there aren't any, and if you, and then people who can't afford to give their children a home-cooked meal because they're working at Amazon and they have to be there for the night shift, and or maybe there's a mother who'd rather do homework with her kid than cook for her kid, so they order out or they go to, you know, fast food places, or and we know that this is, you know, there are no choices, as we know also with, you know, fashion and, you know, what we can wear and what we can afford to wear and what people can, you know, express their identity. And, you know, there's vintage clothes and there's used clothes and there's, you know, difficult times for that. So I was wondering how we're, you know, we're advocating for, I mean, we do it every day. Because I know you and I have the same politics. We were talking about it. That it's a government's responsibility to feed children who can't be fed by their parents. It's a government's responsibility to make sure that people can have coats in the winter so they can go to school dressed warm. How does that, you know, without going from one thing to another, and we can decide how to put this in without saying it. But I know it's a concern of yours.
Very much so.
And I think that'd be interesting to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, I've always felt, or we've always felt, such a huge responsibility to give back from a business perspective, to give back to the communities that we serve. So a really great, you know, example is for Net-A-Porter, we have these vans where we do a same-day delivery in certain cities around the world. And the dream was always, okay, we're delivering beautiful clothes to discerning, wonderful customers, but then the vans come back empty, right? And could there be a way that we could use those vans for the greater good?
Who do you work with?
So we worked with a charity in the U.S. called Good Plus at one time, where we were collecting from customers lightly used or unused children's clothing, toys, you know, accessories the parents might need, call it a baby carrier or things like this. So when you get your delivery from the van, and then you might say, well, guess what? My kid has just outgrown their toddler bed or what have you, and then we would collect that in our vans and then bring it back to the charity, which really was great. And during COVID, you know, we were able to use, you know, the deepest, darkest moments of lockdown to use some of our vehicles for food delivery, things of that nature. I think, you know, with clothes, and I think the awareness is so much greater now, and I see this wonderfully in, you know, my kids and their generation, this notion of clothing not just having a second life, but a third life. Yeah. And so on the one hand, there's industry around that. Okay, you can rent things, you can buy things secondhand if you want something designer and you can't afford it. Okay, great, and it democratizes fashion. But I think the other thing that's wonderful is, you know, there's so much. It's not wonderful that there's so much excess, but the excess can be put to good use. You know, these wonderful organizations like Dress for Success, which work with women,
I've met them.
And it's just, it's fabulous.
Tell us about Dress for Success.
Well, we've worked with them in the past where, you know, they're bringing women back into the workforce. And so they're women who have either come out of very hard domestic situations, women who've come out of prison, and they come and they're doing these interviews and they're trying to get back into society, and they don't have anything to wear. They don't have lipstick to wear, you know, or whatever. They don't have a pair of shoes that are decent. They might have an old pair of sneakers. And so it's Dress for Success. It's, you know, they have these outposts where essentially you could go in, you're given interview training, but also how do you show up? What's the appropriate thing to wear? And then there's a wardrobe that you can choose from, and it really sets you up. And so I think there's so many ways that one can get involved. And, you know, in London, there's so many friends who are doing great car boot sales and things of this nature, just as a way, you know, because if you're in a privileged position where you have not only enough, but you've got too much, what can you do with it to help someone else, or to sort of help, you know, even in a small way, try and tackle these gargantuan problems.
And Net-A-Porter, tell me more about Net-A-Porter. Tell me when did you start working?
So I started 18 years ago. And it wasn't a startup.
When did it start? When did it?
It's going to be 25 in June.
Okay, so 7 years into.
7 years in. a remarkable business, a remarkable founder, a remarkable team. And I remember, I mean, I had been there. It was a newsletter that had launched in the 90s called Daily Candy. I don't know if you remember this. And I remember, and it was all things sort of what's going on in fashion, what's going on with restaurants, what's going on with culture. And I remember I was in New York, and seeing this email saying there's this website that's going to be selling fashion. And I remember signing up immediately, thinking, God, what could be better? I always loved fashion. This idea, could you get stuff delivered to your... I remember the very first thing that I bought, which I still have, which is this Chloe satin drop waist dress. I haven't worn it probably for a long time, but it still sits there. It's this wonderful memento. And, the mission was really to make this fashion consumer's life easier and to also inspire her.
Yeah.
And so what we've seen firsthand, and what I feel so privileged, is not just to work with super teams and really amazing individuals, but really just to see the joy that fashion can bring. Again, you're not solving the world's problems, but it really can put a spring in your step, just like you see here every second of the day. People sit down and whatever troubles they had or whatever they've got going on, they take a bite and you see the shoulders come down and this spark in their eyes. And it's that thing. And I think one of the beautiful things, this might sound crazy, but I think one of the beautiful things about e-commerce too is that, the transaction is separated from the receipt of goods, meaning...
What do you mean?
Meaning, so if you're in a store, which is, by the way, I'm all for stores, and they're great, but you're paying for something and then you walk away with the thing. Whereas actually, if you're buying online, you pay for it. By the time it arrives at your door, you sort of forgot that you paid for it, which is why over the years I've had so many wonderful people say to me, I love ordering because I feel like I'm getting a present.
Yeah. And also the way you wrap it, the way it arrives is very celebratory, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so you started working there, and then what was the trajectory for being
so I stayed
a woman
so I started working there running sales and marketing, and then I started running Net-A-Porter in its entirety. We then launched a number of other businesses, the Outnet, which is a discount business, Mr. Porter, which was a men's business, and over the 18 years was involved in those launches with great teams, and then I started running Net-A-Porter and Mr. Porter, and then I ran Net-A-Porter, Mr. Porter, and the Outnet. And then we merged with an Italian business called YOOX, and then I ran all 4 stores.
So how many people were you,
when I joined, we were probably about 100, 150 people. And today we're 2,500 and change. And there's been different ownership and everything along the way. So I feel like I've worn lots of different hats under the same
and what
roof.
what does it feel like to be a woman who is in this position? I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like. But is it something that you are thinking about other women? Are you thinking about your own kids? Is it thinking about the future now? What we've achieved, what we have to do? I mean, especially in this world right now that we're here, where there seems to be so much backward
going on,
rather than
Yeah. I think as a woman, first of all, I had a couple of great role models. My mom, as I said, was, she's not just a working woman, but I think she really taught me indirectly that being a mom and being a working woman and having a successful career are not mutually exclusive. I also had at my school in New York this phenomenal headmistress named Mildred Berenson, who would stand at a podium. She was amazing. She would stand at a podium, our little lectern, when we had our assemblies, and she was always immaculately dressed, and she wore these little pumps. I think they must have been those Ferragamo pumps with the bows.
Yeah.
And she had this habit of just sort of clicking her heels together. And I remember she would be sort of immaculate, clicking her Ferragamo pumps. And she'd say, because it was a girls' school I went to, and she'd say, girls can do anything. One day a woman will be president. And as a kid, I barely was paying attention. I'm sure I thought it was washing over me. But it was interesting because when I eventually went to a co-ed school, I never for a second thought I was lesser of anything by being a girl. So I think it did kind of sink in. And then as I, started a career and advanced in a career, the question that I get from younger women all the time is, how do you well, not even like how do you do it because you're so great, but just how do you do all these things? Can you do all these things? And I remember reading something in one of the supplements here and I can't remember, it might have been Nigella Lawson who said it, which was around it was something around prioritization. And I think that piece had said, you can have an active social life, you can have all these things, you can't necessarily have them all on full volume at the same time. But what I took away was this priority piece. And the thing that I believe in so strongly is just you need to know what your priorities are. You don't have to justify them to anybody, but know what they are. And then your answer will always sit comfortably with you. So for me, I always knew it was my family. For someone else, it might be their career. That's their choice. But then okay, it's this thing and it's that thing. And so you have to, okay, sometimes you have no choice, right? But in the instances where you can make it. And I think the other piece of advice I would always give is just set your stall out early on.
What does that mean?
Meaning you're starting a job. Let's say I'm coming to work for you.
Yeah,
and I've just had lucky me if I
Yeah.
were. And I'm coming to work for you and I've just had a baby.
Yeah.
And there are only certain hours I can do. Instead of, or I need to make sure I'm out of, in a restaurant's probably not the best example, but I'm running, I'm running the shop and instead of being embarrassed about it, instead of looking at my watch and stressing out, I would say to you, hey, Ruthie, I'd really love to come and, work with you, but every day I need to make sure that my bag is packed at 6 p.m. because I have a child. And then you can choose whether you hire me or not.
Yeah.
But just lay it out. Just lay out the ways in which you work and sort of what works. Anyway, and just being upfront about it.
Yeah, I think that also is the responsibility of all of us who hire people. To be thinking. I just read very recently that Amazon are really proud of themselves right now because they're giving maternity leave at last, or they're giving hours. When I did my first book, Gail Reebok was head of Random House, and she would not let a meeting be scheduled after 5 o'clock. There were just no meetings that you could have where a woman, was thinking about her kids being picked up from school. A man could sort of stumble home like 7 and was late at the office. And so there was a whole initiatives done by us. But I think for us, it's, for me, I think about the people who have no choice. The people who are packing shelves at supermarkets, or a taxi cab driver, or they're working in the responsibility is on us to provide workspaces that for the person who's washing the dishes or coming in one day a week, how we do that. And I think women helping women
So
directing is so crucial now.
And it's new. I mean, I think about it. I mean, it's funny. We have in the company, we have these employee resource groups, these ERGs, they're called, which represent just different parts of your population of your office. So, and there was one in particular that's dedicated to parents and carers. And again, it's an employee resource group, and they all get together and they talk about what they need, and then they'll come and they'll say, hey, listen, we'd love to have an X, Y, or Z thing going on in the office. And I was saying to them, because I'm very involved in the ERGs, and I said to them, I'm like, guys, this is amazing. Like when I started here, I was one of like 4 people that had kids, or not 4, but one very few, and that wasn't. So I'm so happy to see that, but more of it absolutely needs to happen. And I think, women in leadership too. I mean, luckily we're far more evolved than we were as a society years and years ago, but still, I look at my industry, and way less than a third of leadership roles are held by women.
But I think it's been touching from a very long conversation we've had, and a great conversation, is that how many of your memories, whether it was going to Brown, whether it was meeting your father on Friday afternoons, whether it was your mother's, cooking, or her work, or coming to London and making a notebook of friends to call, which I shared as well, or right now trying to deciding what to eat with your husband, or your daughter thinking about what she's going to cook that day or eat that day, is about food and memories of food, and how, thinking of food. That's why we do what we do here. This podcast is to talk about people through food, about their memories. And so I think that, we do kind of generally ask a lot of questions, but close on one question for everyone, which is, if food is alleviating hunger, and food is sharing, food is entertaining, food is creating a framework for your children, of exploring, of adventure, it's also comfort.
Yeah.
And so I suppose my end of this beautiful time with you, and I really look forward to having it. And I'm so glad we've had it. We have
so
to have
happy to be
more
here.
time
Yes.
together. And by the way, I'm coming for dinner.
Yes, you are.
I have to get ready. Is if you do need comfort, if you feel like something that will just give you comfort, is there something that you would go to, Alison
Chicken soup.
Loehnis? Chicken soup.
Chicken soup, hands down.
Tell me about chicken
Soup. And I was trying to think of like, why has, I think, again, you know, they call it whatever,
Jewish
Jewish
penicillin.
penicillin or whatever it's called. Just from a really young age, soup was always the thing that I was given to make you feel better.
Yeah.
But unlike things, let's say, like ginger ale, which you were given when you felt sick, and anytime I even smell it now, I feel sick because it's association. Chicken soup was one of those things where immediately you would feel better. And I remember my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, who was not a good cook. My dad's mom was a great, cozy cook. She made stuffed cabbage. She was amazing. Anyway, not that stuffed cabbage is, but she was
but
amazing.
grandmother's
She made a great
cooking is-
lasagna. She was
yeah.
a fabulous. Anyway, my mother's mother, who was not a sensational cook, made a great chicken soup, lots of dill. She had matzo balls in them that my father described as hockey pucks, but I loved them. And it was always my thing. And there was this place in New York that closed down years ago, but when I was having takeout all the time, called the International Poultry Company.
Oh, okay.
And I remember ordering like quarts of matzo ball soup. And so that's always been my thing and my go-to. And I remember I wasn't married to my husband yet. I think we weren't even engaged. And I had come back from China, and I was incredibly sick, like sick. And I wasn't able to eat anything for about 10 days. And my mother-in-law, who's phenomenal, came over with this pot of chicken soup. And I just remember it was the first thing that I could eat. And it was like putting water on a wilting flower.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
a very nice metaphor. Yeah.
always to me, it's chicken soup. And ideally my husband's chicken soup, there's a place in New York called Butterfield Market, these two sort of food stores on the Upper East Side, and they do a great chicken soup. So when I'm in New York, I mean, it could be 1,000 degrees outside and I'm eating
We'll
chicken
have the
soup.
chicken soup. Okay, well, we'll have that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Loved having you
I want to
here.
stay
Thank
forever.
you. Yes, stay forever. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the conversation, please click the subscribe button. There you will see more videos on my YouTube channel. We'll also be posting new content that you can only find here. See you soon.
Thank you for listening to Ruthie's Table 4 in partnership with Moncler.